Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Metkler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, brought to you in part by our sponsor, the NFL Photoshop. If you jump over to Steel City Underground /photos, you'll be able to jump on a link that'll take you directly to the Steelers NFL Photoshop, which will allow you to select a variety of wonderful images from games about different players, whatever you want, in a variety of different formats. And if you use the code Steel City, you'll save 25% on whatever item you choose to purchase. And with the holidays, that's a perfect gift for Steelers fans. Anyway, today it's going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge, and to help me keep my mind straight and keep focused, I'm going to be joined by our ever-present friend and colleague, Zach Metkler. Zach, how you doing?
Not too bad, Brian. Thanks for having me back on.
Always a pleasure, always a pleasure. So let's, too many people are using the term elephant in the room. I don't want to use that term anymore. Because, if you actually had an elephant in the room, it would be a really uncomfortable thing and very dangerous. So I'm going to skip the elephant in the room concept. Let's just talk about the hot topic for today, which is the news about Ryan Shazier. And we can't go into depth about it because, quite frankly, we're not doctors. We don't play one on Twitter or TV. We did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Therefore, we don't know exactly what's going on. But the thing that I will say more than anything else is I gained a lot of respect for Aditi. I can't say her last name. Can you say her last name?
I've made attempts, but I'm not going to bother trying to butcher it right now.
Aditi, that's who. You know who it is. It's Aditi. She covers the Steelers. Anyway, she posted some things out there because there have been innumerable tweets from a variety of different sources and doctors, all speculating on what Ryan Shazier's back surgery may mean or may not mean. And the bottom line is none of us really knows. We're not the treating physicians. And until they disclose what the prognosis is, anything is just raw speculation. And the bottom line is the facts are all that really matters is hoping that young man recovers for a quality of life, not, as Keith Butler said today, forget football. Forget the football aspect of it. If he's ever able to play again, great. That's fantastic. That's a bonus. At this point, all I'm personally concerned with, and I think most of us should be concerned with, is that he is able to walk out of whatever facility he's in and spend time with his family and maybe kids in the future.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Steelers. People shouldn't be surprised about them keep being tight-lipped about this entire thing, especially a situation as sensitive as Ryan Shazier's. In the past, they've been really kind of hesitant to release any information until they really have a full-on grasp of what's trying to go on with the situation. And personally, I don't blame them. And it's a shame because a lot of people that are trying to be pseudo-physicians when really they have no business doing that are going to be out there trying to speculate what they think is going on, which really is just unnecessarily stirring the pot with the entire situation. You said it best whenever Keith Butler pointed out today, what we should be worried about is not, our team and the prospects of him getting back on the field, but him being able to have a quality of life moving forward that, all of a sudden changed in the blink of an eye with one single play, and that's how quickly your life can get turned upside down. And it's a shame. And, all our prayers are out to Ryan Shazier. You never want to see any player, no matter who it is, have to go through what he's going through at this point in time. I know when I was watching the game on Monday, I don't think I've ever felt so uninterested in the Steelers game just because I felt the wind got taken out of my sails. And I'm sure everybody that was watching the game that's close with Ryan Shazier on the team, his family felt the same exact way. That's nothing you ever want to see happen to anybody. So to see that happen in the fashion that it did is really heartbreaking to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And like normally when I'm watching Steelers games, I have to pace. Especially this year with the way that they've driven us all insane. And I'm up and I'm running around, I'm walking around my living room and I'm tweeting and I'm taking pictures and I'm losing my mind. And yeah, basically, whatever time frame it was into that game, 4 minutes, 11 minutes, I can't remember, whatever it was, I just sat on the couch the rest of the night. I didn't have the emotion left to worry about the outcome of the game. And even my wife, who is used to me being very angry when certain things happen, like holding calls that don't get called, and my traditional "the refs stink" concepts, it looked at me and said, "You're not getting upset." And I said, I can't. There is a underlying message inside this game that is, the game doesn't matter. It's what's happening in that Cincinnati hospital, and not knowing. I mean, this, and so you kind of had to give them really the first half to adjust. And it's amazing to me that that coaching staff and that group of leaders in the locker room and the team itself was able to come out in the second half and focus. Because we saw how the first half played out. Clearly, they were out of sorts and had no idea how to regroup. They played poorly. And they refocused, and they were able to come back and win the game. And I give credit to Tomlin and his coaching staff for that, and I'll give credit to the players as individuals for finding a way to do that. I don't know if I could have.
Yeah, I put the tweet out there during the game. I think a lot of people at home think that it's just some easy thing for you to put that out of your mind. So when you see a player go down like that, it's one of your brothers. It's a guy you're playing next to every single day, every single snap at practice, every single weekend. And to see him go down that nature, that's a really hard thing to put out of your mind. I give kudos to both coaching staffs, really, both the Bengals and the Steelers, for being able to collect their guys and get them back into a position where they can go out and compete. Because anytime you ever see a player go down, whether it's a minor injury or a life-threatening injury like Ryan Shazier is going through right now, that's extremely sensitive. It's extremely hard to overcome and put out of your mind no matter how hard you try. That shows the competitive nature of these guys to really band together, group together, and find a way to stare adversity in the face and continue to push forward.
Absolutely. And, so at this point, really, the message from me, I think from us, everyone here at SCU, is just, keep the Shaziers, their family, his fiance, and the Steelers team as people in your prayers and thoughts, because it's a situation that none of us would ever want to be in. And our hope right now is not for Ryan Shazier, the football player, but just Ryan Shazier, the human being. And let's hope that he's able to make as much of a full recovery as is possible.
100%. I think that's what everyone should be worried about right now, is him just being able to find a way to get back to a normal lifestyle and put this behind him. Having a fiance, having a child. You want to be able to have that lifestyle to be a parent and be a husband for your family. It's a shame, the whole football end of it. Because this is his lifestyle. This is his bread and butter. But life right now, I think it was Cam Hayward pointed out there. Matters his life. So it doesn't really matter anything else beyond that than just him trying to get back onto his feet and get to a place where he can be a living human again.
Absolutely. So, this, when we were kind of plotting out this episode of the podcast, I was inspired by one Mike Mitchell. I had already been fired up, and I know Joe had been, and many of us had been, by the ridiculous arbitrariness of the way discipline is meted out in the NFL. And then Mike Mitchell went on his epic rant yesterday. And or I guess I'm not sure what day it was. Maybe it was Wednesday. Was it Wednesday that he went on that rant? I think it was. So Mike Mitchell went on his epic rant, and that rant really got me fired up. And I was all ready to come on this podcast and just essentially spend 30-odd minutes supporting Mike Mitchell. But we have other things to concern us with too. But I do want to address the things with Mike Mitchell. So we've been saying for a long time, Joe and I have talked about this at a variety of different times on podcasts, about how difficult it has to be for a defensive back in the NFL nowadays to try and play within the rules and avoid these hits that are going to get fined or are going to get flagged because, so many of these plays are bang bang plays, and receivers who are in one position when a defensive back lines them up to try and tackle them or hit them, change positions. And you don't have time as a defensive back to adjust to that. Zach, you played offensive line. I played offensive line and linebacker. For us as offensive linemen, it's much more direct. We know where we're going. We know who we've got our hands on. And there's not quite the same fluidity as there is when somebody's trying to catch a pass. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. When you're on the offensive line, you're coming off the ball, and the guy's right there for you, and your job is pretty much to either prevent him getting to the quarterback or drive him down the field so your running back has a lane. But when you're playing, especially a single high or two deep safeties, they're responsible for such a wide area of the field that they have to be going full speed 100% the entire way through. And, with how athletic these skilled players are getting in the NFL today, you see players like Martavis Bryant, who's a physical specimen running as fast as he is, or a guy like Tyreek Hill who runs sub 4.3 speed. You have no choice but to going full speed. And whenever you're coming down on the guy, you have milliseconds to adjust your body. And to expect a player that's going full speed like that to all of a sudden shift their entire body to a point where they're hitting the most area of the body that makes it 100% clean is a lot to ask for. A player, you could be going to make a tackle, and one of your teammates is making the tackle, changing the entire way that receiver's going or the tight end's going, which makes you put you in the wrong. Or they go and they brace for contact and they put their head down or they tuck their head, and all of a sudden you're making unintentional head contact, helmet-to-helmet contact. And, it's not as easy as you would think to just all of a sudden shift your entire motion of trying to come and make the tackle. And, I understand what the NFL is doing. You need to really be aware of player safety. And so I'm never going to sit there and, argue a flag being thrown for a helmet-to-helmet hit. But the notion that it's a dirty or malicious hit is dirty. There's times where you can tell it's intentional. Ducks his head and he comes head-on spearheading with the crown of his helmet. But if it's just accidental helmet-to-helmet contact, so much happens in those millisecond time frames between when the ball is in the air, the receiver has the ball in his hands, and the safety or the cornerback or whomever is coming down to make a tackle. Impossible for a player, no matter how athletic or how talented you are, to slow time down, make the adjustment, and hit the tiniest of square in the shoulders or the chest of the player. It's impossible to do. So I 100% see where Mike Mitchell's coming from, and to label these players as dirty because they make helmet-to-helmet contact unintentionally, non-maliciously, it's getting out of hand in my eyes.
Absolutely. And I'm going to, when we listen to this, because I'm going to play one of these clips, and this clip that I'm going to play is essentially the clip where Dalton's talking about exactly what we were just, not Dalton, I've jumped ahead in the story because Andy Dalton is in the story. It's the clip where Mike Mitchell is talking about what we were just saying, how it's almost impossible for them to make these minute adjustments. But he talks about that there's other factors like Andy Dalton throwing a ball, or any quarterback really, throwing a ball that's off target and the receiver making a play. And if the ball had been where it was supposed to be, maybe there would be no contact that was illegal. So there's so many factors coming in. So I want to play this real quick.
We are physical safeties. And think about what you ask us to do. We're always the last line of defense. We're always making bang-bang plays. Like, you never see us getting to line somebody up in a hole like a linebacker. We're playing full speed. He's 4.4. We're 4.4, 4.3 speed. Like, aim that. You go do that. You can't. It's just risk of playing football. If the ball is in the air and a man jumps or a man ducks his head, how do you want me to readjust my body? You cannot do it. At the end of the day, this is football. If you want to see flag football, then let's take our pads off. That would make it easier for me. But give us flags for me to pull off, because that way I know what we're playing. I signed up to play full-speed contact football, and we're not doing that. I feel like I got to ask a guy, hey, are you ready for me to hit you right now before I hit you? And that's crazy. I'm going to mess around and get hurt trying to protect an offensive player because he's running an over route. Damn it, your quarterback shouldn't have threw that ball messed up. That happened 2 years ago. I'm not joking at all. Andy Dalton threw a ball to Tyler Eifert 2 years ago. Tyler Eifert had to dive for it. I was aiming for his gut. But if he don't dive, he don't get in the head. That's $50 grand out of my pocket, though, because Andy throws a bad ball. Make that make sense.
I mean, I love how he closes that out. Make that make sense. And that's what Joe and I have been saying all along. It makes no sense. But, you know, you can tell just from listening to that, that, obviously Mike Mitchell is very impacted by this, and he believes strongly in what he's saying. But I just, after listening to this for the last couple days, I feel like this is a truth that so many players have wanted to have spoken out loud, but nobody was willing to do it. And I think what has brought this to the fore is the absolute absurdity of how things are being adjudicated for disciplinary means. Juju Smith-Schuster gets suspended for a game for a crackback block that may or may not have been illegal. The debate will rage forever. I view it as slightly, outside the rules. I don't think he was intentionally trying to go outside the rules, but I think, again, you slightly miss. To me, Vontaze Burfict is running right at him, and if he can't remember to keep his head on a swivel, that's not on Juju. Juju's making a block, and his running back is going to run right by him, and he's trying to prevent the tackle. I think that's a perfectly legitimate football play. Even the Antonio Brown play, where George Iloka was initially suspended, and then that suspension was lifted, and he was just fined. Even if it's, in my mind, not a clean play, I don't think he's intentionally trying to hurt Antonio Brown. I think his goal is to separate Antonio from the ball. And I think that when he launches at him, I don't know that he knows he's going to hit helmet to helmet. I don't look at it quite like that. But again, that is a much more specifically litigated against by the rules kind of hit, and should have been flagged, should have been fined, or suspended. It's the discrepancy there, and we'll talk about that in a second about why, in my view, that is. But I mean, do you equate those two hits as being similar or different?
Yeah, I think they're very similar. And personally, in my eyes, I don't think either one was a suspendable incident. In my mind, there's dirty plays and then there's football plays. And, you're going to hear that narrative a lot when you come down to talking about all these situations and the inconsistencies with these penalties being thrown around the NFL. In my mind, both plays should have had a flag. Was correct, as much as you and I have our dislike of the way the refs do their work, especially Walt Anderson. I think you look at it, they both violated the way that the rules are set up right now. Fine, period, done, no questions asked. But to say that they're dirty plays, Juju Smith-Schuster was in yards of Le'Veon Bell running up there. If Juju doesn't make the play right there, Vontaze Burfict has a very perfect shot at coming down and getting a very solid tackle on Le'Veon Bell. So he made a very good football play. Is it illegal in the sense of what the NFL rulebook currently states? Yes, it's technically a crackback block. You can thank Hines Ward for the Hines Ward role moving forward. But, at the end of the day, I don't think many coaches are going to sit there and say, they'd rather see you make the block to protect your player than not. I hate to say that, but that's the way it is. Looking at George Iloka in the end zone, anyone on the Bengals coaching staff is going to be upset with that play, because at the end of the day, the Steelers are driving down. Bengals are barely holding on to that one touchdown lead. His responsibility in such a closed red zone space like that is to do everything in his power to prevent Antonio Brown from coming down with that ball. I don't think he was intentionally going for the helmet. Unfortunately, whenever you have a player like Antonio Brown, he's going to do everything in his power to come down with the ball. It's so hard to disrupt any passes that go to him because it seems like his hands just are magnets for any footballs being thrown his way. But you're going to do everything in your power to deliver a huge blow to disrupt the pass, disrupt the ball, and try to prevent the touchdown from being scored. It just happens that Antonio Brown's arguably the best receiver in the NFL, so he came down with the pass no matter how hard you hit him. But to say either one of those plays were intentionally dirty or intentionally trying to hurt another player, I don't think is accurate. And in that sense, do I think the flag should have been thrown? Yeah, because by definition they violated the play. But I think they're both just football plays of what guys are trying to do. And when you see all the inconsistencies going around, there's plays that are very flagrantly not supposed to be there, like the Rob Gronkowski hit, the Mike Evans taunting, whatever you want to call that situation, the AJ Green, Jalen Ramsey. Those are all non-football related incidents. They're just players getting outside their heads, doing things they're not supposed to be doing. But to see a guy like George Iloka and Juju Smith-Schuster is making very hard football plays. Yeah, they're going to be concerning because of the fact of the whole player safety issues in the NFL today. But I personally have no problem with either one of them. And I know that's not really necessarily a favorable opinion, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you completely. In my mind, both hits are legitimate football plays. And you brought up Gronkowski, and that's where I'm heading with this, because to me, that is the biggest measure of inconsistency that I believe is what is inciting fans to essentially, and across, you know, fans and players alike, to not be able to come to terms with the image of these two different plays. So again, Juju's block is in game context. There is a play going on. He's making a football play. Iloka's hit is in game context. There's a play going on. He's making a football play. Then you've got Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski is having a little bratty hissy fit because he's being held by the safety or the cornerback for the Bills. And you know, that guy makes a pick. And Gronkowski's frustrated. He's lying on the ground, out of bounds. The play is over. We're no longer making a football play. Gronkowski decides to do a Jack Lambert impersonation, doing a stutter step, winds himself up, and delivers a blow that, if it occurred on the street, would have gotten him arrested. It was an assault. There's such a vast difference between what is clearly a malicious intent, an attempt to I mean, I don't want to say Gronkowski had it in his heart to do true harm to the guy, but it was a means to try and release his frustration and vent on this completely helpless individual lying on the ground. And he hits him in the back of the head, and the back of the head is not an area that is particularly safe to be hit in. It's a very vulnerable area. So you're talking about real luck that player is not severely injured in what I think had something, you know, much worse happened there, could have been litigated. I mean, he could have been accused of actual assault on the field because the play was over. This was not a during a football play kind of a hit. And to say that is the equivalent of what Juju Smith-Schuster did, a one-game suspension for each guy, is so beyond insane that I don't think anybody can come to terms with it, except for, you know, look, they're two fan bases, everybody's going to support their team, but at some point in time, you have to look at reality. You know, denial apparently is a disease that all of us suffer from at times, but you know, this is just beyond denial. This is a complete misrepresentation of what occurred in that game.
Yeah, I think it's insane to me. You know, I'm not as upset that Juju has the suspension that he has, because at the end of the day, to be honest, I'm not surprised that the NFL handed down the suspension. Especially, I think the taunting really kind of pushed forward that suspension to kind of be a litigation. So, you know, you look at that. But then I think what upsets me the most is that you see the situation with a player like Gronk. You know, I've been a fan of Gronk's, admittedly, for most of his time in the NFL. The guy's a very passionate football player, but he's hot-headed. You know, in the situation, the Patriots were up, I think, either 17 or 20 points at that point in time. I don't believe that there really should have been a pass interference call on the play that he was calling for. That's just me trying to be as objective as possible. And, you know, you're the best tight end in the NFL. Your team's up. You have no really real chance of losing there. It's outside the realm of what you should be doing in football. And there's a lot of these arguments going on, looking at the Steelers-Bengals game compared to what happened there. People saying that all the displays that happened during the Steelers-Bengals game were bad for the image of the NFL. But if you want my honest opinion, what Gronk did in the situation in the Pats-Bills game is more of a negative factor to the NFL's image than anything. You know, that's not football related. You know, it wasn't like there was high tensions building and you saw a little bit of pushing and shoving after play. It wasn't like, you know, the fan base getting upset or the Pats are down unexpectedly and they're trying to come back. It was just an unnecessary instance. And to sit there and equate that to what Juju did on a football play, which, yeah, should have had a penalty thrown based on the rule book, but you're going to sit there and say it's a one-game suspension. compared to what Gronk did, that doesn't sit well with me. And, there's other players in the league that have had similar situations where they don't even get touched for making the same exact non-football thing. You look back at Sue for the Dolphins earlier in the year against the Ravens. When Ryan Mallett was in the game, he choked Ryan Mallett and tried to throw him to the ground, and he didn't even get fined. I mean, he might have gotten fined, but there was no suspension, and they pretty much moved on from that. And the inconsistencies with these non-football related things going on with these players does not sit well with me. And at some point in time, the NFL has to sit back and realize, either we need to be harder on these players making these non-football things, or just realize that you can't have these inconsistencies with the rulings, and you need to find some level of looking at whether the player is a repeat offender, whether they were making a football play, whether it was outside the realm of what's going on in the game. There's a lot of factors that are moving there, but at some point you need to find some level of balance and consistency.
Yeah, I and several other people, maybe even you included, I can't remember because I've read it so many different times now, have been stating that to me anyway, here's the bottom line between all of this. There are going to continue to be these levels of inconsistency because the rules as they are actually have absolutely nothing to do with trying to protect the players. They in the way they're adjudicated. The rules are there to protect the players. Let me say that. But the way that discipline is meted out has nothing to do with the level of potential danger to injury to the players. It has to do with optics. The reason Juju got suspended and Iloka didn't, his got overturned, was the taunting. It's the optic of him standing over Burfict in a primetime Monday night matchup. On top of that, having what is supposed to be one of the premier announcers gushing about how awful it is and atrocious it is, and this is the worst part of football, when in fact those kind of plays, take the taunting out, are part of the reason that we watch football. It's the big hits and those kind of things that we want to see. It's why we watch. It's why that game was a Monday night game. No one is going to ever believe that Bengals the Bengals and the Steelers, or the Steelers and the Ravens coming up this week on Sunday night, that there are not better games. The Eagles and the Rams is probably a better Sunday night matchup, a more premier group of individuals right now, but it won't get the ratings. Why not? Because there's not that element of danger that there is with Ravens, Steelers. There's not that threat of the big hit, of the violent altercation, of that kind of play. That's what we're attracted to. And I quoted this out the other day from Gladiator. Are we not entertained? Of course, that's what we're doing. And so, this complete nonsense, the NFL either needs to just stop pretending and say, look, if you make it look bad in a grand stage, you're going to get suspended. If you do it on a 1 o'clock game where it's a regional game and nobody's watching, we don't really care. Because that's how it comes off anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you look at the Steelers-Bengals, a lot of people were complaining the fact that was on a Monday night game when, the Bengals are, below 500. They're on life support when it comes to their playoff hopes. And the Steelers are cruising at 10-2 right now, 9-2 going in the week. So why is that game on there? And you said it perfectly. It's because the fact that what are the Steelers and Bengals known for? They're known for these bloody, gruesome matchups that end up being really contested, close games that – some hard-hitting situations going on. I think it was on First Take they talked about it. One of the analysts on there pretty much go to work the next day talking about how you had to turn the game off because the hits were too hard. Whether we like to admit it or not, the physicality of football is what brings us close to it. And yeah, there's plays where it's extremely too hard, but 10 years ago or even sooner than that, we were celebrating these types of plays. And I'm not saying that we should go back to those days, because I think we know more about player safety and overall medical issues that can come from that to be going back to those type of dark ages, so to speak. But, you're expecting to see that. And I think if you don't have guys like John Gruden going out there and Sean McDonough pretty much saying like, hey, this is okay or this is not okay, that's, whether we realize it or not, that's swaying our opinions of how these situations, when John Gruden's sitting there, pretty much slandering the entire way, talking about Juju as a player, making it seem like he, is this hostile player with this track record, when pretty much everyone knows that that's not true. It's painting a very negative picture, and we're very easily persuade people when it comes to these type of narratives. So when you have them sitting there saying that it's all so bad and doing all that, and then you have this public outcry. The NFL is bound to take some action to pretty much appease the masses, and I think that's kind of what happened with the situation. Why you see these disparities. If you have this huge public outcry for a player having an issue with something that happened during a game, you're more likely going to see some heavier punishment laid out compared to, like you said, a regional game where only that area of the country is watching the football game compared to a national scale Sunday night or Monday night or Thursday night football game.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to bring up certain issues in the past, but I mean, this is not new for the NFL. When you go back to the Ray Rice situation, Ray Rice is accused of domestic violence, and there's no video yet, right? He's accused of punching his girlfriend and knocking her out in a hotel or in the elevator. And what does he get? Like a suspension or something small. And then the video comes out. Well, now we have to rethink everything. And it has nothing. They knew, and for them to say they didn't know is baloney. They knew what was going on. They knew what had happened. They could have taken the high road, but no, because they want the game. They need the players in the game and they don't want the stars to be lost. And at the time, Ray Rice was an up and coming guy, or thought of very highly anyway. He may have been slightly less effective at that point in his career, but still a name, right? But once that visual comes out, once that image hits, where DMZ or whoever it was, TMZ. Broadcast the video from inside the elevator. Well, now there's that visual aspect of it. And, I don't want to equate these two things. Ray Rice, that's criminal behavior. I mean, that's crazy. And I don't advocate them and say that the same in that. The similarity to me is in the way that the NFL decides to met out discipline. If you're going to embarrass us, the discipline's going to be severe. If you don't cause an uproar, we'll try and slide it under the carpet.
My opinion, in the real world, that's not how it works with most situations like that. It shouldn't have taken the video for the NFL to take that seriously. They should have stood strong with it before the video came out, so that when the video does leak or does come out or somehow gets discovered, they're not sitting there trying to backpedal from all this public outcry that they weren't hard enough on in the first place. I'm not saying you need to treat every single issue with an iron fist, because there are some issues in the NFL that that are less than other ones, like Cam Hayward wearing the Iron Head eye paint a couple years back, and the NFL was coming down hard on that, harder than they were other situations. It's because it got some national spotlight. NFL people were coming out saying, he's violating the dress code for weekend games. It's inconsistent, and at some point in time, they need to sit there and realize that they need to have some standard that they're appeasing to, and not just brushing things under the rug because people don't care. People don't care as much as they would if it was a national spotlight incident, and that's not to say that some issues are worse than others, but there are situations that need to be taken seriously, and some that simply aren't as big of a deal, like a player wearing the incorrect shoes on a football game. No fan's going to sit there having this huge public outcry because Antonio Brown's wearing a pair of custom cleats beyond warm up. That's not a huge primetime issue, but when the players are doing really nonsensical things like a Gronk situation, that's something you need to take seriously and not just have it with a grain of salt and throw it under the rug and pretend like a one-game suspension is going to make it disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that's I got that off my chest, and now we should kind of at least spend 5 minutes talking about the game. Because this is a big game coming up. I mean, if the Steelers manage to pull this game off, they beat the Ravens for a second time, sweep the series this year for the first time in a long time, they will lock up the division. There's two ways to look at this. It's an AFC North game. The division title is, while it's not on the line, it can be clinched, with this win. But the other aspect of it is, if they lose this game and beat the Patriots, they're still in the driver's seat. But if they win this game and beat the Patriots, they're even more in the driver's seat. So, I mean, I look at this as still being a fairly critical game, and it's not the same Ravens team that we saw in Baltimore. At least I don't look at them the same way. How about you?
No, I think 9 score that we saw in Baltimore earlier on in the season, I think it's not going to be anywhere close to that type of situation. I think it's going to be a lot tighter of a game. I've gone through this roller coaster of a season where they've looked extremely weak and vulnerable at times, and they've looked at almost nearly unstoppable at times. And I think a lot of that has to do with their defense, which finally seems to be rounding out, even with some of the injuries they've had with players like Jimmy Smith and whatnot being out. But at the end of the day, it's a much steadier Ravens team than what we saw earlier on in the season. I still think they're a beatable team. I still think they have their flaws, especially offensively. But at the end of the day, I think it is a tighter matchup than what we saw earlier on in the season.
Yeah, it's one big difference is Brian Williams is going to be there, and I don't think he played the first time around, and that's going to make it more difficult to run. Jimmy Smith not being there is going to be interesting, and because while Marlon Humphreys is a guy that we even talked about during the draft as a potential target for the Steelers, and is has a lot of potential as a corner for them, comes from a real good program at Alabama and all of that, but he got picked on against the Lions. And it'll be interesting to see how well he recovers from that. It kind of looked like whenever they went deep on him, he had problems with that. He was tight on guys when it was short passes and things he could keep in front of him. But as soon as it got behind him, he had difficulty recovering from it. So I think that there could be some potential matchup areas there if they can take advantage of it. Christina Rivers, she did a real nice report on the
Yep.
Ravens and how they look right now. And the one other guy she picked out was, I think his name is Kennedy, who I don't know much about, but she highlighted him, and he looks like he's an up-and-coming additional piece for them. The defense has been stronger than it was earlier in the season. They shut out the Dolphins. They shut out, I think, the Packers. We're not talking about powerhouses here, I know, but they did beat the Vikings, and the Vikings have been a team. Well, no, they didn't. They lost the Vikings, excuse me, but they didn't get killed 24-16. And that was in Minnesota. So it's a game you kind of are like, all right, but they let the Vikings score 24 points. They did lose to the Titans, tight game. I was kind of surprised they lost that game considering how the Titans had been playing when I was watching it. And they walloped the Lions. They handled the Lions a lot better than we did, if truth is going to be told. But at least it was at home as opposed to being in Detroit. You can see they're a better team defensively. I'm not 100% sold on their offense, though, although I think the line is playing better than it did earlier in the year. I think Flacco is being more Flacco-ish, if that makes sense. In other words, instead of trying to be a West Coast guy, he's throwing the ball deep, which is what he likes to do. And I think that has helped them. But I think what's helped them more is that offensive line getting put together and coming into sync a little bit better, and they're able to run the ball. And if they can run the ball, that opens things up for Flacco.
Yeah, I think you look at the offense specifically. Ronnie Stanley's kind of really come along to being this tackle that, personally, when they made that pick, I thought they reached substantially. I thought he was a solid player coming out of Notre Dame, but I thought physically and fundamentally he was relatively weak at the point of attack. But he completely proved me wrong, and it made the Ravens look extremely smart for taking a tackle that early like they did last year. But I think you look at this offense, Alex Collins, guy that was released by the Seahawks, looked like he was going to be nowhere. All of a sudden went from being a third or fourth string running back to them, the kind of being the focal point of this offense when it comes to their run game. And I think getting Danny Woodhead back healthy, whenever Danny Woodhead's healthy, he still has the ability to be a very good receiver out of the backfield. And we've seen the Steelers struggle with those type of players. I know Buck Allen was trying to be that guy whenever Danny Woodhead was hurt, and the Steelers did a relatively good job of maintaining him. But at the end of the day, Danny Woodhead is an experienced guy who's been there and done that, and he has all the skills in the world to be able to take the top off of defense if he gets the ball in his hands in open space. But my biggest knock on the offense has been Joe Flacco, and I think if he's able to – he's one of those quarterbacks that if he's able to be efficient with the ball, not turn it over, make smart reads, whether it be a check down, he still has a decent deep ball, which I've always complimented him for having really one of the better deep arms in the league. He has the opportunity to go and keep this game contentious. The Steelers' run defense, they've shown that they can be tough for the most part. But a lot of times they get those one or two big runs, and a guy like Alex Collins is very very capable of pulling those runs off. I know he didn't get a lot of opportunities against the Steelers in the first game, but he still had 9 carries for 82 yards. And if you're doing the math at home, that's 9.1 yards per carry. So he was very efficient with the ball in his hands, although 50 of those yards came on one play. But still, the Steelers have been susceptible to those big plays. So seeing a guy like him behind this kind of reformed offensive line worries me to an extent. Not to the point where I'm saying we're looking at another Ezekiel Elliott situation from last year's Cowboys game. But I think Alex Collins has improved steadily as the years gone along. As the Ravens offense has become more consistent, we've seen him be able to kind of show what he's capable of doing and show that he has a spot in the league as a 1 or 2 running back.
Yeah, and I think that my biggest concern looking at this game is the tight ends, because the Ravens will run a lot of 3 tight end sets. Ben Watson is, I think, if not their leading receiver, one of their leading receivers as a tight end. And while he's not, the Ben Watson of old, he still is savvy. He still is sneaky. He can still do some things to get open, and he has pretty sure hands. Essentially, that's going to come down to what are we going to do? Because there's going to be Max Williams, there's going to be Ben Watson, and I can't remember the other tight end that they have off the top of my head. Who was it?
Nick Boyle there.
Yeah, Nick Boyle. Right. Yeah, you've got 3 guys who can essentially catch the ball. And they're going to go heavy and they're going to throw and run out of those sets. And with the thin way that our linebackers are set up right now, the depth that we have is weak. I mean, Sean Spence coming back is a direct response to the fact that both Tyler Matakevich and Ryan Shazier were hurt. And obviously, at least he's familiar with the system, and something that, Joe and Eric had toyed around with and I didn't poo-poo, but had been poo-pooed all over the place about, I can't remember what his name is, and I should. Don't cross the moats. I'm going to cut that part out. Arthur Moats, may be taking some snaps inside as an inside linebacker, which is not something he's done as a professional much, if at all. And it looks like if that's in fact the case, then Terry is going to be ecstatic and happy and throwing a party on Sunday, because James Harrison's likely to get a hat and is likely to get in the game. How much and when, who knows? But they're so thin, and they're going to be pushing people around to try and cover things that I'm a little worried about how they're going to manage the tight ends. What do you think they need to do to protect themselves? Because it felt like last week when they were getting eaten up, they were trying to protect Tyler Matakevich by playing zone all the time, and Dalton was picking the zone apart. And I think if they go to that type of a scheme here, that could be tough for them. I think they need to have that balance that they've shown in some other games, where they can play some man, they can play some zone, and mix it up. Because if they get stuck in one scheme, it's going to get figured out, and it'll be worse next week too.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that the Steelers are greatly going to miss from the Shazier absence, is the fact that his athletic abilities are second to none in the NFL, and I think you see that with Tyler Matakevich, which was his number one knock, other than his size coming out of Temple last year, was the fact that he's not a really athletically gifted player. He'll give his all every single play, kind of like Vince Williams does. But it's not the same athletically. And, I think he is the best option when it comes to the linebacker, inside linebacker position, but you have to maintain his health. He's such a key special teams contributor. I'd rather him be out now and be good to go for the playoffs or even the Patriots next week than push him back for this game. You see a guy like Arthur Moats. He came in, he spent the first part of his career with Buffalo as an inside linebacker, outside linebacker hybrid with their 4-3 defense, but he has the ability there, and personally, I would prefer to have Moats inside, either him or Spence. Fans quickly forget, we drafted Spence in 2012 to be the guy. He was supposed to be the guy that came in here, and, had it not been for his injuries, I don't think the Steelers ever even looked at taking Shazier, just virtue of the fact that Sean Spence was this athletic linebacker out of Miami that we thought was going to be, this savior to be the guy that we haven't had in the middle since James Ferrier was there next to Lawrence Timmons. So I think both of them will work well in tandem alongside of Vince Williams to kind of make a semi more athletic interior which hopefully will give them a little more flexibility than what they had with Matakevich, because you have to respect the fact that, he's not Matakevich, that is not really that athletically gifted of a linebacker, so you can't be throwing him to a lot of man with one-on-one situations with tight ends and slot receivers. So I think they'll be able to do more of that with either Moats or Sean Spence. But I think you do look at a guy like James Harrison, his ability to move up now to the number 2 and really kind of get those reps coming off the right side. I think that's realistically going to be a good situation for them, because he's always been the guy that's been able to go one-on-one with the left tackles, and his pad level, his strength, his ability to be an elite NFL football player in his prime, it's invaluable. And I think he brings this demeanor to the Ravens matchup that the Steelers need, a guy that's been there. He's been through so many of these Ravens matchups. He knows what's at stake with winning this game and continuing to push forward with their win streak. So if any guy I'd like to see come off the bench and be able to perform at a high level, it's James Harrison. He's been dealing with these injuries as of late with his back injuries and things of that nature that's kept him off, and then him being a healthy scratch due to a lack of necessity. But this is James Harrison season. Last quarter of the season, going into the playoffs, he could be the boost that they need to continue to build off that pass rush and kind of offset some of the injuries they've had on the defense. I'm hoping that's the case, because I think a tandem with him, we've seen Chicolo be able to come in and do halfway decently, and Dupree and Watt started to come along a little bit. With jury's still out on Dupree with his progression, but Watt's looking the part thus far. To an extent. So I think seeing a guy like Harrison come in there and hopefully having Moats and Spence on the inside should hopefully be decent. Mainly because of the fact that I think both Moats and Sean Spence are slightly more talented than LJ Ford or Tyler Matakevich, just due to their ability to be more of a well-rounded linebacker, similar to that of like a Lawrence Timmons. So, but there's no denying the absence is going to be felt with a guy like Ryan Shazier in the middle, just due to his athletic ability and his ability to just splash plays whenever the Steelers need him.
Yeah, absolutely. So look at this game. What do the Steelers have to do, in your opinion, to come out of this as kings of the North and wrap up the AFC North?
I think the Steelers really need to protect the football. There's one thing that the Ravens defense has been excellent doing this year, and that's forcing turnovers. Whenever they're forcing turnovers and Joe Flacco is protecting the football, they are a relatively solid football team that has the ability to put up some points on the board. So we've seen Ben Roethlisberger make some errant throws where the offensive line is getting the ball knocked down, or there's a miscommunication on the route. You need to see Ben protect the football to the best of his ability. And I think the red zone offense is going to be one of their biggest factors moving forward. They need to be able to get down within the 20, and love Chris Boswell to death. I think he doesn't get enough support as a potential killer bee that I think he deserves. I know other people at SCU think he deserves. But I think you look at it realistically, they need touchdowns. These AFC North matchups are always tight for the most part. You don't want to have it come down to the fact that you had to settle for a field goal instead of a touchdown at one point in time, or you turn the ball over one too many times and are forced to come back and really try to push the envelope and not be able to complete it. So I think being efficient in the red zone and protecting the ball are my two biggest factors for a Steelers W.
Yeah, and I agree with you about protecting the ball. The Ravens have scored, I think, 29 touchdowns. 22 of them are from the offense. The other 7 have been either defensive scores or returns. And they need to prevent the defense from contributing to the final tally of points. And I think the only way they're going to do that is to protect the ball. Ben has been much better in the second half of the season and has been much better at protecting the ball, but every now and then he will still try and force a ball in. I am a little concerned about Juju not being there and having to rely on Eli Rogers. I think his inconsistency and really slide back in play this year is disturbing. And it's tough for him. He's dropped passes, he's tipped passes, and that makes me a bit nervous because if he's going to do that in this game, in this group, it's going to result in turnovers. I think the key for them will be getting some consistency and maybe being able to get in front. If they can get in front of the Ravens, if they can make the Ravens play catch up, that's not their game, and I think that will benefit them heavily. But they cannot let them explode for big plays, and they cannot turn the ball over. And if they can avoid those things, they'll come out, I think, ahead of the game. I told Joe the other day, I said, to me, and I feel like I keep saying this every week, but to me, it's both sides of the line. It's the offensive line and the defensive line. If they can stop the run, and if they can keep Ben safe, and they can run the ball at least a little, because it's not going to be easy to run the ball on the Ravens. If they can do those things, then they can win the game. But I expect this to be a tight game and not a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. It'll be a much more traditional Steelers-Ravens type game than I think the last one was. So we'll see. It's another Sunday night game. I think this is the last. Is this the last one? Is this the last primetime game? Please let me cross my fingers. Yes.
I want to say the Texans game is an evening game as well, if I'm not mistaken. And that's that Christmas or Christmas Eve football game, Week 16.
Yeah, I thought it was
Patriots
4:25.
It's sometime. The Patriots are 4:25 and the Browns are 1. So that Texans game, I'm not remembering right now.
Yeah, neither am I, and I feel compelled to find out. I don't know why it matters. I just want it to. I want it to be over. I want these late night games to be over so bad. I got to get up at 4 a.m, and I don't want to have to be, staying up until midnight and getting no sleep. No, it's 4:30. The Texans game is a 4:30 game. So this is it. This is the end of them. This is the end of the late night games. So hopefully they can get through this stretch, which we all thought was going to be maybe the toughest stretch of the schedule. And come out ahead. Again, Zach, thanks for coming aboard and riding with me on this rant of a podcast, because we did hit a lot of topics and went a little long. Joe's going to love us for that. But we'll see how it goes. Once again, remind everybody how they can follow you on out there in the intrawebs.
If you're going to get a hold of me, you can contact me on Twitter at GZSports_ZM. Always on there, always looking to talk to new people.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. Until next time, remember, it's chaos out there. Be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.